Blending grapes to create a wine is an ancient tradition that spans the entire world of wine and represents some of the most historic terroirs of the world. Chianti Classico follows in this tradition. Yet, as with all great things, the quest for perfection has been sought since the vines were first turned into wine. Prior to the late 19th century, the majority of wine made in the Chianti Classico zone was based upon the Canaiolo grape, a delicious red varietal that makes good wine, but a few people thought that the land of Chianti Classico had more greatness within it. Barone Bettino Roccosoli, the second Prime Minister of Italy, is credited with creating the first recipe for Chianti Classico, but that is not the whole story. The Iron Baron, as he was known, wanted to make better wine and used his vast estate as a living laboratory to grow different native grapes, all with the intention to blend with Sangiovese to make the best wine possible. He aimed to share this knowledge to continue Chianti Classico's legacy as a world-renowned wine that was not just merely a commodity, but a wine worthy of the tables of the most discriminating palates of the world. Roccosoli was a member of the Gergofali Academy, an agronomic society focused on improving the welfare of agriculture in Tuscany, doing much in the way to improve wine. He studied and worked with universities across the region to develop a blend that would put Chianti Classico on par with the likes of the already historic and famous wines of Bordeaux, Burgundy, and the Rhone. In 1872, Roccosoli wrote a letter to the University of Pisa professor Cesare Studiati describing what he felt was the best blend for Chianti. This letter is now known as the Roccosoli recipe, although maybe a map or suggestion would be the best way to describe it. Here's a direct passage from the letter Roccosoli wrote. I confirm the results already obtained from the initial experiences, that is, that the wine, Chianti, receives from Sangiovese, which was Sangiovese, its main dose of aroma, for which I particularly aim, and a certain vigorous sensation. From Canaiolo, the sweetness that mitigates the hard quality of the former without diminishing its aroma, with which this grape is also endowed. Then Malvasia, which could even be excluded for wines destined for aging, tends to dilute the product of the first two grapes, increases the flavor, and makes it lighter and more suitable for use as a daily table wine. This seemingly simple letter of explanation and founding changed the course of Chianti Classico forever, and for the better. With Sangiovese now the star of the blend, the wine began to receive worldwide acclaim at fairs and expositions, drawing the world's attention back to the home of the Renaissance. As other growers and producers in the region saw the success of the Baron's wines, Castello di Broglio, they quickly followed suit, and somewhere along the line, a recipe of sort was created, stating 70% Sangiovese, 20% Canaiolo, and 10% Malvasia. In the 1960s, Italy moved forward with a revolutionary law, the Gloria Laws, which established the government decree and protection of wine appellations across Italy. It took a few years, but in 1967, the rules for Chianti DOC, which at the time had 7 subzones, with Chianti Classico being one, were approved for official recognition. Each DOC had specific rules to achieve the declaration of DOC, Chianti Classico, even if the first disciplinare, the rules for Chianti Classico, were more stringent than for the others, stating you can grow a maximum 5.1 tons per acre of grapes, you must have a minimum of 12% alcohol, and a vecchio requirement, aka aging, 2 years and 3 years for reserva respectively. The original blend decreed in the 1967 approval stated Sangiovese 50% to 80%, Canaiolo Nero 10% to 30%, Trebbiano Toscano and/or Malvasia del Chianti 10% to 30%, and then unspecified complementary varieties 5%. As you see, the 1967 blend follows the recommendation of Roccosoli, but in addition to that, the blend also followed what was planted in the ground at the time. The above held for many years, but the Chianti Classico revolution seeds were just being planted as producers sought to make higher quality wines and distinguish themselves from those other areas permitted to label those wines as Chianti. In 1984, with the approval of the DOCG status to Chianti, Chianti Classico as a subzone, instituted more stringent requirements again to showcase the importance of its terroir and wines, stating Sangiovese 75% to 90%, Canaiolo 5% to 10%, Trebbiano Toscano and or Malvasia del Chianti 2% to 5%. In 1996, Chianti Classico formally became its own DOCG, and with it, another change to the disciplinare for the blend, stating Sangiovese 75% to 100%, a momentous moment in the history of the blend. You no longer had to add Canaiolo or white grapes. And then furthermore, 15% of the blend could now be other red grapes allowed in the province of production, including various native Tuscan grapes and well-known international grapes such as Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, and others. But it is very important to note that varieties associated with other Italian regions were not allowed. In 2002, there was a slight modification to the disciplinare to require a minimum of 80% Sangiovese, continuing the focus on this most noble of grapes. In 2005, the Consorzio took the step to make Chianti Classico a wine of only 100% black grapes and eliminated the blending of Trebbiano Toscana and Malvasia del Chianti from the Chianti Classico blend for the 2006 vintage, decreeing that the blend now must be a minimum of 80% Sangiovese and 20% other permitted red varieties, both native and international. The last and most recent change to the disciplinare came in 2021, with final approval in mid-2023 with the introduction of the UGA for Gran Selezione. This new change for the approved wine, only starting with the 2027 vintage, these wines will be a maximum of 90% Sangiovese and a maximum of 10% only native varieties. The story of the Chianti Classico blend is a story of passion, history, evolution, and the continued search for the best expression of the Chianti Classico region over time.